Ashley, what's your favorite kind of fishing?
That's a tough one because I really love all types of fishing, but probably fishing for brook trout in like little mountain streams. What about you?
Mine is like topwater bass fishing.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's a good thrill.
See, this is my issue with our species today. I just feel like walleye aren't very fun to fish for.
Okay. I do love walleye. I think I'm excited to talk about some other cool stuff about them, but I agree trolling is not the most exciting activity.
Yeah. In case you forgot, here's how this works. Ashley and I are going to rate walleye on a scale of 1 to 10 in a variety of categories. Then we'll average our scores to get their wild rating. First up, mobility. Mobility. It's how they move. We're going to start walleye off pretty weak. And this contributes to my they're not fun to fish for thing. They're not very good swimmers.
But they're a fish.
Sure. Okay. They're not very good swimmers compared to other fish.
Okay.
Compared to me, excellent swimmers.
So what did you rate them?
I gave them a 2. So just, again, I'm pretty harsh because if this was, I don't know, a weasel that could swim like this, holy cow, that's great. But they can only really swim up to 2.5 miles an hour in small bursts. Otherwise, it's like slow and steady wins the race, which has its place, but they're not like big migrators either. It's just kind of, I don't know, very disappointing is how I would describe it. What did you give them?
Well, that plays well into what I gave them. I gave them a 3, so just a tiny bit higher. And I did that because although, yes, they don't have a ton of, flashy swimming moves, they do move. And I kind of extended this throughout the day and the year. Mm-hmm. So they're cold-blooded, so they need to have some sort of energy that they get from their environment. So depending on how warm the water is and where they can find their food, that kind of dictates where they go. So like when it's warm, they like to be in deeper, cooler water so their metabolism isn't like too fast. But then they do come to shallow areas to eat, like in the morning and the evening, which is when it's good to fish for them.
But isn't that like all fish?
Yeah. And I gave them a 3, right? So nothing too crazy.
They're just like a very fishy fish. That's what we've covered so far.
Yeah. Moving on to size. Size. It's how big and small, how short, and how tall. I gave walleye a 4 for size.
I thought you liked walleye.
I'm very quickly starting to realize that I like one thing about them specifically, and we'll get there.
Okay.
But it's not been a thing we've talked about yet.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. But for size, I gave them a 4. They're a pretty average sized fish, honestly. They're about anywhere between like a foot to 3 feet long and up to like 5-ish pounds. That's in Wyoming. They can get much bigger in other states, but the Wyoming state record walleye, for example, was 17.5 pounds and 34 inches long.
That feels too heavy for how long that fish is.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a pretty chunky walleye.
Yeah. I like that. I like chunky fish.
Yeah, and that was back in 1991, so that was a really long time ago.
Gotcha.
What about you? What'd you rate them for size?
I gave them a 7.
Whoa.
And one thing they do exceptionally well is survive. They don't have a lot of predators, especially once they get to full size. And so the longest living walleye was alive for 29 years.
What? Wow.
Which for a fish is really good. And I think that's a fair bar to compare them against like other fish. We've talked about other fish lifespans. I believe cutthroat trout was like 12 years, and that was really impressive.
Yeah, and salmon, I want to say, are something like 5, maybe.
Yeah. 29 is exceptional.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Let's go with the flow on over to accessories. Accessories are special adaptations that the animal has that help it survive. For walleye, I'm going to give him a 5 for accessories. I feel like it was harsh to start, and so I'm coming off of that.
Okay.
And I'm giving them a 5 because you talked about how they're cold-blooded, but they're a cool water species.
All right.
Which is kind of like a unique class of fish. So you think of cold water species.
Yep.
Trout, species that need especially cold water to survive. And then warm water species, which is like bass, can basically survive anywhere, as long as it's warm enough. Walleye are kind of like both. And you talked about it a little bit of like they can really move to get what they need in a certain water body. And so they need cool places, but there are cool places within some of these warm water bodies.
So they can have a special adaptation to move around within a more wide kind of range of temperatures.
Yeah, they can
get what they need.
We'll talk a little bit about where they are, but they can expand their range because they can survive in a bunch more water bodies based on their behavior versus based on their biology, which is super cool.
That is really cool. I would have maybe even ranked them higher for that.
There are other cool water species, and so again, I'm trying to measure expectations here. What did you give them?
Okay, I gave them a 7, and it has to do with why they're called a walleye.
Why are they called a walleye?
So their eyes actually are pretty big compared to other fish, and they have this kind of like glassy, whitish, almost wall-like reflective quality to them.
It's kind of eerie.
Yeah. No, it's a little creepy, and that's why they're called a walleye. It's like you're staring at a wall. But it's like that actually. They have a special layer in their eyes called the tapetum lucidum, and that reflects light, which actually helps them see really, really well in low light, like at night. So a lot of nocturnal animals that hunt at night have this adaptation. And we were talking about because of that need for cool water and temperature regulation, they like to hunt early in the morning and in the evening and even at night. So they've got the edge over the animals that they like to eat because they can see really well when other animals are just kind of floating.
I feel like tapetum lucidum sounds like a Harry Potter spell. Like it means like light, like create light, you know?
Yeah, it probably does mean something like that in Latin. Let's splash on over to style. Style. It's how attractive they are. So I gave walleye another 5.
I feel like we're leveling off here. Very consistent.
Yeah. So they're not the prettiest fish. They're typically kind of like this like olive green, kind of goldish yellow color with a white belly and kind of some like darker like vague stripiness on their back. One interesting thing about how they look, though, is they have a really prominent white spot on the lower lobe of their tail fin. It's like the bottom of their tail fin. And that's the best way to tell them apart from another fish called a sauger that we have in Wyoming. And they look almost exactly the same otherwise. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's probably really good if you're fishing for them and there's different regulations to be able to easily tell them apart.
Absolutely. What did you give them?
I gave them a 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the way you described them is perfect. If you imagine a fish in your head, that's what a walleye looks like, just with 2 dorsal fins. I think I think one of the things that's kind of interesting about them is they're torpedo shaped.
Okay.
But the torpedo shapedness is kind of offset by the lack of speed. So like you think of other torpedo shaped fish like barracuda, incredibly fast, like a torpedo. Walleye basically throw this advantage away and decide to continue to be slow while looking as if they could be fast. I mean, that's how they trick their prey. It's like, well, I might be fast. You don't know.
Yeah. Well, and when they do go fast for a walleye, it's like in those little short bursts when they are getting prey. So maybe their torpedo shape helps them in those moments where they're going to kick it in the high gear.
They're mostly hunting at night, and so it's probably not big exotic chases. It's a really quick little, I'm already on top of you sort of thing. So that
ambush
makes sense.
Kind of.
Yeah. Let's torpedo our way over to intimidation factor. Intimidation factor is how scary is this animal to other animals or to us? And this is where walleye kind of come into their own. I'm going to give them an 8.
Whoa.
Yeah, quite the turnaround. And it's because they're kind of crazy looking. And not from like a style perspective. Like I think our style scores were fair, but their teeth are like kind of aggressive.
Yeah, they're gnarly.
Yeah, and they mostly, especially when they get to adult size, just eat other fish. And, you know, a lot of the fish we have here in Wyoming, especially our trout, it's like, well, it's bugs. If you're a bug, maybe it's intimidating, but walleye are really efficient predators. And in the fish world, there's just not that many of those, especially in Wyoming. And so I think they're very deserving of their 8. What did you give them?
I gave them a 7.
Okay.
Kind of a different angle here, but neither parent actually cares for their eggs.
How do they?
I find that a little scary.
Yeah. How do they survive then?
Right. Well, okay. So it's a different strategy. Some fish build nests or defend their eggs, and walleye just lay their eggs, which fall into like crevices or rocks or wherever, which might protect them from currents and predators or not.
What? Okay. Sorry. Continue.
And so they just like scatter and forget, right? And so there's obviously very low survival rates, like less than 1% of the baby fish called fry even survive their first year. So to make up for this horrible survival rate, they produce a crazy high number of eggs, a large female can lay up to 500,000 eggs in a single season.
That's crazy. So it's funny because this is kind of like a bug reproducing strategy, right?
Yeah.
Just do a bunch of it and it doesn't really matter if they survive.
Yeah. And I mean, I ranked that high for intimidation because, you know, I feel like not caring at all about what happens to all your little babies, that's a little wild. That's scary.
It's kind of like that nature's metal stuff. Like just, all right, hardcore.
Yeah, pretty intimidating. So with that, let's hatch over to Razzle Dazzle.
Hopefully.
Razzle Dazzle. They're unique features that no other animal might have. For walleye, I gave them an 8.
All right, we're finishing strong.
Yeah, and I mean, although they might not be the most entertaining to fish for, they are arguably one of the tastiest fish on the planet. Definitely my favorite, which makes them worth, you know, the wait to catch. What do you think about walleye?
Never had them.
What?
Yep.
You've never eaten a walleye?
No, I haven't. I didn't grow up in a place that had walleye, so.
Oh my goodness. We'll have to catch some one time because they just have this like mild, slightly sweet flavor, delicious to eat. They hardly have any bones. I really like to make them either baked with like honey mustard and almonds or in fish tacos.
I do love a good fish taco.
Well, we'll get you eating a walleye sometime soon so you can experience that, you know, 8-worthy flavor. What did you give them?
I gave them a 7.
Okay.
And we've kind of touched on it a few times, but I just want to like really highlight it. They're native to the Great Lakes region.
Which is where I'm from.
So yeah, kind of like that upper Midwest. But they've been introduced throughout most of the U.S. I believe just about every state has walleye in it now, and most of Canada. And part of that is because they're so attractive to anglers. And people really love to fish for them. People really love to eat them, like you just said. But there's not many fish that you could introduce effectively across that giant of a range. And so it's really impressive that they can make a living surviving as that cool water species in all these different places, all the way from Florida, you know, here to Wyoming. Those are very different environments. And so I think it's super cool just how adaptable they are.
Absolutely. I agree.
And now it's time for our wild rating. Our wild rating is the average number of points given for all of our previous categories. Stephanie, can I get a drum roll, please?
The wild rating for a walleye is 5.5.
You know, that feels really fair.
Yeah.
I was worried we started pretty down, but I don't think they deserved that. I think 5.5 is like perfect.
Pretty middle of the road for a pretty great fish.
Yep. Now that we've learned about walleye, you may be interested in experiencing them in nature. There are a few options, but before you head out and do these activities, always keep your safety in mind. Experiencing walleye in nature, I'm not going to spoil Ashley's bit here, but it's going to be fishing.
Hey.
And if you're going to fish, especially if you're going to fish from a boat, it's really important to make sure you have a properly fitted life jacket. It's really important to make sure you're following all those Coast Guard regulations as well. Ashley, what does fishing look like for walleye?
If you actually want to get out there and catch some walleye, you can do that in several of the major reservoirs or other places in Wyoming, including Gray Rocks, Boise, Seminole, Glendo, Keyhole. First, make sure you got your fishing license and check the fishing regulations, of course, before you head out. And enjoy, hopefully, frying up a couple for some tacos.
You know, maybe I've been too hard on walleye. I should go fishing for them and maybe try some out. And I'm already looking forward to our next episode. Are you?